Okay. So I'm thinking as the other guys will find us along the way. Apologies, I sent this notification a bit late, so some guys are probably sleeping. But I'm thinking the best time normally is 9. Today I pushed it late because I sent the notification a bit late. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go through each one of you, or rather sample, like now as guys join. I want to just get a feeling of how the exercise was. If you had any challenges, and after doing that, I'll go through. I'll spend a few minutes. I'll spend a few minutes just to go through some theory, and then we'll go to the notebook. And the idea behind notebook is just to try and use the data that we were working on previously to explain some basic statistical concepts, especially ground understanding on the concepts that are fundamental for machine learning. And not everything statistics, but we'll start on the very, very basic, and it will form a launchpad to visualization. So after understanding some statistics, we'll go into visualization. That is subsequent classes, maybe not today. Yeah, so I would start with, as usual, I normally use the participants. I can see we are 6 guys. So I'll start with Daisy. Daisy, were you able to go through the notebook? Did you have any problems? Are you good?
Yeah. Hello.
Hi, Daisy.
Okay. Hi. I'm good. I hope you guys are also good. So I was able to go through the notebook, but the part where we replaced during the session sikuweza kumove na nyinyi, so when I was going through later, ile part where we replaced the null value kwa height, please to replace the null value with a 0. I'm still not able to replace that. Nimejaribu kuandika hiyo code imekata. I don't know what I did wrong. I'm still not able to replace that value.
Okay. Not a problem. I think we could go through your notebook at some point. I'll give you control, and then you get to show us, and any one of us could help. Yeah. All right. Good stuff. We go to Elisha.
Hello.
Hi, Elisha.
Hi. So I'm new. I'm not exactly sure what you guys are talking about. I just saw the link and I decided to join because I'm interested.
Okay. Welcome, Elisha. Just a quick brief. What we normally do is we've been running some classes every Saturday between 9 and 11, 2 hours. And the classes started from the foundations, so from the very, very basics, anchored on the idea that, or the assumption that anyone attending the class has no idea about machine learning. But as much as there is a possibility of guys coming into class with some ideas, but the classes, that is how we are running them. So we've done, I think, the 3 or 5, I think today is the 5th one, 4 recordings on foundations. They are available on YouTube.
Okay.
And they build up onto each other. So I'll try as much as possible in today's session just to do a recap. But at your own free time, you could get access to those videos and walk through them. I'm not so sure what level you are in with regards to machine learning. Do you mind sharing that with us?
Sorry?
Do you mind sharing what level you are in with regards to machine learning? Are you beginner, intermediate, advanced?
Okay. I can. Where can I place myself? Let me place myself as a beginner.
Okay.
because I recently just got certified on the basics.
Okay.
So I think I'll be good to proceed with the guys.
All right, all right. But the way we are running them is if you have ideas or concepts, you can actually contribute. So it's a collective platform where those people who understand some concepts can actually chip in and assist others.
Okay. Yeah.
Good to have you. So we move to Silas just joined. Daisy, Eve. Eve, are you with us? Okay. Let's go to Silas. Silas? Okay. Sling? Timothy?
Hello?
Yes, Timothy.
Oh yeah, I have managed to follow through the week.
Oh, so you have no issue with the notebook, huh?
So far, I had no issue.
Okay. All right. It's my hope and trust that the other guys, Silas, Sling, Eve, will join us, and maybe they're having trouble or they're doing some other stuff when the class has started. Sling?
Yeah, here.
Ah, good, good. I always like participation during these classes because what someone says or contributes will not only help them but also help the others. All right. So yeah. So the question, Dennis, was if you are able to follow through the notebook through the week, and if you have any challenges.
No, I'm good, no challenge.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Okay, so like I said earlier, I'll just go through some really, really basic theory, and we immediately go through the notebook that we had done. And the main reference would be to understand some basic statistical concepts that are fundamental to ML, and also would be a launchpad to the visualization. So once you understand certain elements like central limit theorem, which are fundamental in understanding or even trying to come up with conclusions when you're doing your EDA. EDA is exploratory data analysis. So we'll most likely have two statistical sessions for today and the next coming Saturday. That is now the plan moving forward. So you guys can see my screen. If I am too fast, for those guys who have not gone through the notebook, I encourage you to go through the videos and go through the notebook. If it is basic, no worries. If there is something that is missed out on that any of those notebooks, you are free to like share with the team or even make suggestions. And for those guys who have done so, we will go through the notebook. So for Daisy, you had an issue. I'll go through the entire notebook again, and then we give you controls to project your machine. But even in the course of the week, like what Eve did, she reached out to me, and I created a Zoom session, and I was able to help her. I encourage guys, if you're stuck through the week, you can reach out and we have a discussion where you're stuck, and you'll join the link, and we can be able to walk through the problem together. All right. Millicent, I saw you just joined. Karibu sana. Good stuff. Okay, so someone has chatted, Alicia, okay, all right. I've just seen this chat from you, Alicia. Okay, so I prepared a lot of theory, but I'll just go and I'll go straight to the theory that adds up, or rather builds up on what we learned the other day. Okay. So I would share this. And we will go through this, but after today's session, I wanted the class to be a bit practical and a build-up of previous classes. So I remember the previous class. For those guys joining us today, this has been the build-up and this has been the summary. Yes, Achebi? Achebi, are you saying something? Okay, all right. So this has been the build-up. I'll just say summary. We attended the first session where we generated our own data set of a game called DATS. Based on that data set, we went through the second session. The first session was to understand machine learning within the context of a game we call DATS. And then through that game, we generated our own data set. 6 guys gave feedback on Excel sheet based on what was requested. And based on that Excel sheet, I created a data set to help us understand some basic data cleaning concepts, how to handle data cleaning. That formed the second session. And I think the second session after the third session, yeah. And then the subsequent session was the last Saturday. We didn't have a session, and because I had an invite on Nairobi Women's and sorry, not Nairobi Women's in Machine Learning and Data Science. Yeah. So today we are building up on that data set where we finally came up with a clean data set that we can go through and start doing machine learning. But before we do that, I wanted to explain some statistics based on that data. And the objective was, can we build a model that would predict whether someone is most likely to hit or miss the bullseye when you're playing darts, hitting or missing the bullseye. So I'll go through that notebook at a later period, maybe after we take our break. Then for now, I want to highlight some of the statistics. Now, with statistics, what we are doing essentially is to study and make predictions based on a certain study of a certain group. Yeah. So, for instance, if we look at that game, and it could be any other thing, we looked at that game, we wanted to see who is most likely to hit or miss. And this information would help us in either identifying some training needs for those people who are missing, or even it could be, to be specific, it could be identify some training needs so that you can, as a coach, you can actually tell. Now, what you do in this case, you cannot put together all the good guys in the country to tell you, or even to study them, to understand what secret do they have in terms of how they throw the darts, or how they position themselves, how much force they use when throwing that dart. It is not practical because it's a huge number. So what you do is you pick a sample representation, excuse me, and study this with the hope that whatever you study would somehow reflect the big population in terms of the statistics that you are interested in. Yeah. So there is a very, very common term called sampling. Sampling is where now you take a portion, or rather a group of elements you're studying and study them in separate. So if, for instance, a population consists of 1,000 people, or rather it could be people, it could be animals, whatever it is you're studying. So if it is 1,000, you decide to generate a sample of, say, 100. 100, you generate 10 samples of 100 each. Yeah. So you study them separate. So that's 100 forms there. A sample, but now this sample needs to be random. You cannot say you're picking. Okay, you can choose to pick number 1 to 10, the first sample, number 11 to 20, the second sample, number 21 to 30, like that until number 91 to 100 as your samples. Yeah, but there is a downside to doing that. We'll come across that later. It's something to do with the bias when doing sampling. We'll cover that. Another way would be to think of these people like in a jar. Okay, no, of course they can't be people in a jar, but think of them as, it's like when you're talking about, say, balls, the small balls, not people. You put them in a jar, you shake, and then you pull one out. You shake again, and then you pull one out. That is slightly better than picking 1 to 10 and then 10 to, yeah. And a sample representation means you're giving every individual an equal opportunity to be selected to exist within that sample. So when you do that, it's a simple random sampling, okay? Now, if you have a set like we did in an Excel sheet, if you have a set, a data set that has several columns, we have, in our Excel sheet, I remember we had the target variable as either miss or hit. And the previous, we also had a column of points. We had a column of height, and we had a column of distance, the distance within which someone stands from the board. Now, if you want to study, you can choose to study the entire data set, or you can choose to study a subset of that data set within the chosen sampling sample, from within which you will sample. So when you select a subset, say for instance, you just want to study what's the height distribution of those guys who miss. What is the average height of those guys who miss? And what is the average height of those guys who hit the bullseye? So since we have a column for hit or miss, the sampling frame is, or you're looking at that subset, those guys who exclusively miss. So that could form a sampling frame. So it is a list of population of interest within the main population. It could be gender. You just want to study a group of female who either miss or hit. It could be a certain age group or age bracket. So whichever, depending on the domain expertise that you have, you can decide to study that data with regards to how you intend, or with regards to what you feel as a domain expertise, what would give you more robust conclusion in your study. Now that is a sampling frame. Okay. Now sampling bias is when the way you sample or the way you choose those individuals systematically omits or favors the outcome. Yeah. So the way I'm thinking is, if you are a professional darts player, you already have some info in terms of what makes someone a good darts player and what makes someone a bad darts player. Yeah. So with that background information, you might be inclined to try and balance the way you select. So you look at certain features of an individual. Maybe the height has a factor, maybe it doesn't, maybe the eyesight has a factor, So with that information, you might be inclined to pick specific height and balance it with specific, for those guys who get a miss, and for those guys who get a hit. Yeah. So your domain expertise somehow influences the anticipated outcome, and by doing so, it introduces some biasness. Yeah. So for as long as now that is introduced, that is sampling bias. So this can at times be intentional, or at times it is unintentional, and there are several examples of the same. Now, this is just an example where you make telephone calls. So for instance, you're in Nairobi and you want to do survey about COVID-19. And you say, those days before the mobile phone was so common, we used to have landlines, and landlines were based on the region. So if you know it's 02, that is definitely Nairobi, and then the next, say, 2 or 3 would now determine which place within Nairobi. So if you select, you want to study guys along Ngong Road, and that region, say, for example, starts with 5, so it's 025. So you go to the postal directory services and you pick all the 025, and then you decide, let me make this phone call. You will have chosen a sampling method. You'll have chosen a sampling method in picking those guys to call, but this would bring in some bias. For instance, if someone does not have a phone within that region and you want to study that region, and this region is guys along Ngong Road, or it could be guys along Mombasa Road, but they have a cell phone, so those guys would be omitted in the survey. If you have guys who are they're not interested, it would be good to know within your sample space how many guys are interested in the survey, how many are not interested. Yeah. And then it also means that you're not factoring this out. So this sampling method is somehow omitting or influencing the outcome by omitting some type of people who are relevant in the study. Yeah. And if we reflect back to the way we chose the guys who gave the feedback, we would then ask ourselves, was it random, or was it does it have bias, or did it not have bias? So if in the group, I posted in the group that we'll be having this class and this will be the topic. And then from the group of approximately, I think right now we stand at, by then it was around 200 guys. A few guys came for the session. I think we were around 17 or 18 guys who came for the session. And then from the 17, during the class, I say that anyone who is interested, or rather, everyone should think of all the parameters. When at that particular point, we are talking about independent variables and target variables. So independent variables was basically what you think as an individual would actually determine the outcome of either a hit or a miss. So we came up with the distance, for instance, the distance from where the person stands, the eyesight. Does this guy have poor eyesight or not? And other variables like, I think the height, yeah, the height was also there. So the guys who attended in class, as much as they were around 15, 16, we got 6 people responding with 6 Excel sheets, okay? So these Excel sheets, each of them had, I think 20 observations, so 20 rows basically. And each of those 20 rows, there are some that did not have the features or independent variables of others, okay? I'll show you in the notebook for those guys who missed out. So the question then goes, the selection of the individuals, was it random? Did it naturally occur, or was it not random? The next question would be, the way these individuals populated these Excel sheets when submitting their thought process, was it random? Was it based on the information? So those are some of the elements that affect the output of any study. Yeah, how do you choose your your data? How do you choose your sample data, and how do you work on it or choose it without having bias? And there are several types of bias. So the way there are several sources of bias before you go to types of sampling. The first one is convenience sample. This is just because of either it was too complex to choose, and then you settle on a certain sample by compromise. That one is convenience. It's out of convenience that you ended up with that kind of sample data. Another source is voluntary response. Voluntary response is you only focus on guys who are voluntarily give you that information. So in a study, you need to also have an understanding of those guys who are not willing to give you that information. Yeah, so that because this would have an impact in the output. Yeah, and even in your analysis, so the entire process. So that is also another source of bias. And then blinding, there is a term called blinding. And the way I would put it is if this is like doing a research with absolute secrecy. It's really difficult to achieve or get that, meaning all the participants have no idea what's going on, and let me give an example. If you are studying the impact of two medicines that are for curing, say, cancer, or even now we're in the COVID-19 situation. We have different people with different thought about the entire process of detecting whether someone has COVID. Some people are the line of thought that the test equipment could be faulty, it could be biased. So if we study the effect of, say, two drugs in tackling a specific disease, so you need to administer this drug to a certain patient without the patient knowing. And even the doctor administering this drug to the patient should have no idea, because the drug should be put in such a way that both the two drugs are same. Yeah. So you administer and then have a research study and then come out with a conclusion. So more often than not, it's very, very difficult because if the doctor knew that this drug is more effective than the other, like I said earlier on, they are more inclined to make a decision of picking this one than the other one, because this is a patient. That is just an example. So blinding is trying to hide, or rather to keep every single thing a complete secret. It's normally very, very difficult, but that's the whole idea. So lack of blinding means there is some bias that is likely to creep in into the study. Yeah. So in statistics, drawing a conclusion without something about something beyond the range of data, or rather without considering bias, yeah, rather the sample has some bias, it's called extrapolation. Yeah. So conclusion and inference made from that are not normally they're not reliable and can be easily debated, or rather subjected to a lot of debates. Okay, it's not conclusive. Now, the more precise definition of random sampling is all the points. I will illustrate this in Jupyter Notebook. All the points of constituting the sample should not influence the outcome of the other output. I will explain this, meaning that they are all independent. The subset of the random variables are all independent. I'll show this using the dataset that we worked with. Yeah. And we also have stratified random sampling and cluster sampling. Yeah. So stratified is where within we create groups, and these groups are called like strata. And within these groups, we randomly pick samples within the groups, yeah, separately, and then each of these samples we collect them to form the final sample, and then we use this sample for study. This would really help us when we want to refine and generate enough observation within each task, within each group, to be able to derive more meaningful inferences. So if you want to study female playing darts as compared to males playing darts, yeah, would it give you more conclusions, or rather better conclusions? Yeah, so it's you as the domain expertise to look through the data, that you have, and decide whether you want to analyze this data based on the groups that you've seen. There are times when you organize, or rather split your groups into by age, or by salary range, or by location. You're most likely to get more inferences as compared to looking at it in a global way. Yeah, so that is stratified random sampling. You randomly select samples from within specific groups called strata. Yeah, and then clustering. Clustering, still working on groups, but now you don't randomly generate samples within those groups. The samples are sample of clusters, sample of groups. A good example is if you wanted to study what is the average salary of machine learning engineers in blue chip companies, or on the top 10 companies in Nairobi. So the first thing you do, you really cannot take all companies within Nairobi, or even individuals within those companies within Nairobi. So the approach would be randomly identify the top 10, and then randomly pick which groups are you going to study. And then this group could, maybe Safaricom could be one of them, or East Africa Breweries could be another. But you select randomly which of these groups you're going to study, machine learning engineers. Yeah, and then consolidate these groups that you've selected to form your final sample that is clustered. So there is always a slight confusion between stratified and clustering. I think it's well explained, and it is good for you to understand the difference. Yeah. The previous one was a simple random sampling. Yeah. Okay. There are terms that you will come across as you do machine learning. I thought it wise to just put this up here, but don't worry if it is a bit early. There is a term that it's actually a differentiation of the general definition of simple random sampling and the refined definition. So remember, random sampling to be there is random sampling that are not independent. Remember, the random sampling, what you choose should be independent, meaning the random values that you select should in no way affect the outcome of the other random variable. So if in this case, the random variable we are looking at is the average mean of the mean of heights for our population. Our population is those guys who are playing darts game. So the sample this generates, say, 10 samples. When we are selecting the first set of random values from the first to constitute the first random variable, yeah, from the first sample, with that value, when you select this next sample, will it affect the outcome of the second sample? That is where now the independence come in. Let me use 2 examples. The first one is when you take, for instance, a dice. You throw a 6-sided dice, you throw it. you get a 1 at the top. So your random variable would then be, say, the value that appears at the top. So if it is 1, the random variable at that particular experiment is 1. You throw it again, the random variable, maybe if number 6 appears at the top, it becomes to number 6. But when you selected number 1, in no way does it affect the outcome of number 6, right? But for instance, we are coming to this experiment of ours. We generate a sample, and in that sample we get a specific height. We get a specific observation. We pick it as one of the random values for that sample. We run it again, and then that random value is selected again. So it will definitely affect the output of the next sample. Yeah. So there are two terms, with replacement and without replacement. With replacement, it means you are actually not selecting, or you're reducing, or rather just completely replacing, ensuring that a value is not selected twice. Yeah. So within the sample, a value is not selected twice. Yeah. Without replacement, it means that there is a possibility of selecting it twice. So with the replacement is now clearly making it independent. And that is in the more refined definition of simple random sampling. It gets easier when, as we move forward, and I'm hoping that when I'll be running the Jupyter notebooks with you guys, you'll get more clarity on this. Sampling without replacement. I've explained this. Without replacement is the possibility of picking the same random value in two different samples, and by so doing, it will definitely affect the outcome of the second random variable, which is the mean. So if a mean height of say 5.6 observation for observation number 6 is picked twice in 2 samples, it's highly likely that the average mean, which is the random variable we are looking at, the height would change, and I will show you that in the Jupyter notebook. A mathematical way of representing this is for independence, the covariance is 0, but if it doesn't have independence, meaning without replacement, the covariance is not 0. So these are some of the terms that you need to be aware of. A high level, as we walk towards central limit theorem, I'll explain what central limit theorem is. But the main objective of sampling is to eliminate bias, because bias is, since sampling is to give equal representation, equal opportunity for that particular data value to be used in the research, bias could omit some or even add one. So by eliminating the bias, we need to be, okay, as a way of eliminating the bias, we need to be keen on the sampling method that we choose. It can't be eliminated, of course, 100% absolute, but reducing it or even explaining this bias in your research results would actually give you more credibility in terms of people adopting your research results or not. So if a bias was not factored and explained, someone is less likely to use your research conclusion. And research conclusion could be either you'd work towards generating a model that does a specific task, and if you did not do this part well and the bias was not reduced to significantly, then someone would choose to use your model or not to use your model. Yeah, just because of this. Okay, up to there, I hate a lot of theory because I look like I'm talking alone. This is not like a class. I can't see faces, so I don't know if people are with me, or people are leaving, or people are sleeping. So I think I'm going to take a slight break and pause it to you guys. If it was fast, if there's any concept that you missed out. Wow. Did you guys hear anything I said? I've just learned that I was on mute.
Currently, I've also lost your slide.
Or I've disconnected the slide. But did you hear? Could you guys hear me?
You were lost for some time, for like a minute.
Oh, but before then, you could hear me.
Yes.
Oh, okay, okay. I wanted to hear you guys. I think I must have pressed the mute button. I wanted to hear your feedback or questions. Is there anyone with a question? Timo? Daisy? Edgar?
So far, I'm all right. Sina swali.
Oh, that's all. Okay. Edgar?
After that, I'm okay. I'm following. Though I joined late, but after that, I'm good.
I noticed you joined a bit late. But
Yeah.
karibu sana. Eve?
Yeah.
Oh, our morning. I'm following.
You're following? Were you able to go through, because earlier on in the class, I called your name, but you were silent. You were able to follow through from the beginning?
I think I joined a bit late, but yeah, I followed.
Okay, Millicent?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm following.
Okay. Robin?
So far, so good for me. Yes, I'm following.
Okay. Silas, you don't like talking in meetings, so I'll skip you. Timo, uko sawa?
Link iko baya mana. Ni mbaya, but
Oh, link yako?
yeah, but I'll try.
Oh, okay, okay.
Just following. Pole pole.
All right. So what I'm going to do, I know with theory, it's very, very important. It's when you're doing machine learning, you can't run away from statistics and how it plays out with the decisions you make moving forward. So it might be a bit boring, but it's inevitable. You just have to understand. You must understand. Oh, there's an echo. I don't know where it's coming from. Okay. I was saying you must strive to understand some basic statistics, and we will be revisiting this as we advance further into the class. So this will be just doses of statistics. So for today, I know previously we've covered the basic statistic when talking about a population, things like the mean, standard deviation, variance. And today, I think we will just conclude with the central limit theorem and form the fundamentals of our visualizations next Saturday. So today we won't see the visualization, but based on our understanding, we'll go straight to visualization after this class. Okay, let me just share the notebook that we had earlier on. I reviewed that. Um, can you guys see my screen now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. I'll go through. I'll quickly go through the notebook we had here last weekend. I think you guys have confirmed you're okay. Apart from Daisy had an issue, so I'll go through it, and then Daisy will just share her screen. We see where she's stuck, and then we help her out, and then we move to understanding those statistical concepts that we've discussed. So for those guys who were not there, this notebook, the data set was DATS. So guys thought of observer. Observer is the person who was making the recordings, and these are the observations number. And then height is the height of the individual playing the DAT game. Pressure is the force. So we just came up with a arbitrary way of measuring the pressure, just putting a number. Timings is okay. Guys were determining whether the independent variables, like now, depending on what they felt was important, they came up with specific independent variables. So what I did was to merge all those that were given and try and see opportunities of how either to clean, is it significant, do we have enough information, yeah, walk through the journey. So some people provided this timing, and I didn't quite understand why the timing, and I assumed this timing was probably a measure of how many times they threw the dart. The size was the size of the individual, which is different from the height. And then the distance an individual stood from the board. And then I power is poor, standard, good. P is poor, standard, and good. And then points, the points these people earned. And then was it a hit or a miss? Okay. So the objective was, of course, you see some people did not provide the pressure column. Some people did not provide the size column, timing column, I power column. Some people did not provide that. Okay. So if you check the null values, you see we have some columns with a bit more null values than the others. Yeah. Like here we have 19 values that are not null, meaning over like around 99 values are null. Timings the same, size the same. So this is a significant amount of missing values. So what do we do with these missing values? Okay, that is going to be the determinant. And how do we clean this? So other things worth noticing is the column names were not standard. We had some characters. Not changing this would not help us. You won't be able to type some of these characters, so you need a way of removing them. So basically, we did a lot of data cleaning, but of significance was how do we check this out? We have height in measures of meters, apostrophe, like now inches, and some people provided it in feet, and some never even thought of meters or to provide. How then do you proceed cleaning and standardizing to make sure that all this height is captured in a common way? Yeah, and also handling missed null values. So the entire notebook, you can visit the previous video to follow through the process of how we arrived at the final notebook. And the final notebook removed all those characters, and I would quickly just scroll through. I would quickly scroll through to what you came up with as the final notebook. We have null. Yeah. So I believe you guys have your notebook open. So we'll just continue with the same notebook. All right. This is now our final notebook. It's much cleaner. The height is in meters. It is in, I think, yeah, in meters. The distance, we don't have null values, and it's the column headings are much better. And we can now do, okay, it's actually not this one. This one still has null values. I think it's this one. This one has null values. The final one. Go through. Okay. Power. There we go. So this becomes our final data set. No null values. The columns are all in. The column names are well labeled. We can make reference to them. We have the characters. We have the outcome, the target variable. We have the height in meters. So everything is standard, and we can actually use these parameters to learn how to do a classifier on whether to miss or hit. The reason why we chose this is because most data set we use in our learning environment are always clean. You end up getting an Excel sheet with this. And in our class, it was important for us guys to know how to clean data, because in real life, the data is normally very dirty. Even what we went through is just a tip of the iceberg. So it's data cleaning is a nightmare to so many people, and you can easily give up, especially if it is frustrating. You don't know how to do it. Yeah. Now, today, what you're going to do, this forms the eventual notebook. This forms the eventual notebook that we are going to eventually learn how to do a predictive model, or the predictive model would be either what characteristics, given a set of characteristics, will this person either miss or hit. This becomes our target variable. And after this, we need to understand the sampling, the terms of the statistics for this data, understanding the statistics for this data, and using it to move to the next level, where after we understood the statistics, we can move to the next level where we visualize, do exploratory data analysis. We'll do a lot of visualization. After visualization, we do data preparations, preparation in terms of how do you convert the categorical variables like these ones to integer, and to have everything as integer. There's some common terms called encoding. We will cover those. And eventually we build a model and make our predictions and then interpret the prediction. And that will be it. Pretty straightforward journey. So I'm going to make a request. There is a question here. Why do you have to set the engine to Python? I thought that was automatic. Now, there are instances where depending on your data, the import would fail. Depending on your data, the import would fail. And if you have no idea why the import is failing, it's giving you some funny characters. You could try that. Let's restart the kernel. Okay. In this case, the previous time it failed, and I noticed that if you add the Python command, it helps in formatting the file. Somehow the error disappears, because there are times when, especially if you have date timestamp. I don't know why, a specific reason, but adding engine to Python solves a lot. I'll probably just figure out and get back to you on that, Silas. You're the one who asked that question. Yeah. But quickly, if we go to the documentation, we can always go to the documentation and understand the engine. Just a minute. The engine variables, header, names, engine. Okay, this is the only information they give. It's not so conclusive, but as it's mentioned here, it's optional. What I noticed is when I specify the engine, there's some errors that are handled by Python. Okay, so guys, I'm going to make a request that I take a slight break from this, and then when we come, let me run all this. When we come, we start with sampling distributions. So we will type, and what I'm going to explain to you guys is going to be it's going to be central limit theorem. So we'll go through the sampling. I explain to you what we've covered in theory, and then I'll conclude with the understanding of central limit theorem and why it's important in machine learning. Okay. Hi guys, welcome back. So before we start, Daisy, do you mind sharing your screen? We see where you got stuck. I can give you host control. Hello, Daisy, are you with us? Or Daisy hasn't come back yet?
Yeah, hello.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't mind sharing.
Okay, let me make you host, and then you'll give back the host control to me after the presentation. We continue. Eh?
Okay.
You're now the host. I'll stop sharing so that you share your screen. Eh? Let me stop sharing my screen. Okay, go ahead and share your screen.
Hapana, ngoja.
Okay, we can see it.
Can you see my screen?
Yes. We can see it.
So I got the error. Let me go there. So I got the error here trying to replace the null variable.
Okay.
This attribute number, this 76. So I tried. I saw following the recorded tutorial on YouTube. I tried replacing, but ikakataa, bado inabaki ikiwa null.
To replace null value. Oh, okay. I can see what you do. Either assign it to a new data frame or use the word in place equals to 2. You put a comma
Here.
in place, yeah. Put there, and then you do shift tab. Put the cursor right there. Shift tab. Okay. Just run it.
Oh, thank you. It's not
Does
good.
work, huh? Yeah. So you could
Yeah.
run the other cells. You could run the other cells. I believe you'll be good. You had finished typing the other cells. Huh?
No, but I'll finish now.
All right. Okay. So what you do, just give back the control, and then I showcase. We start typing today's work. Okay. Thank you. Let me share my screen. And then also I would also want to say, Daisy or anyone else who gets stuck in the course of the week, I'm available after say 5:30 or 5:30 every day, Monday to Friday. We could always share some, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, just going through where you're stuck. Or the weekends, I always try to keep them mine. So if you're stuck in the course of the week, we could always plan the best time to help you out. Don't wait until Saturday. I think you've reached out and she was able to make some progress. So that is the spirit I would like to encourage. Okay. If I share this screen, you guys can see, yeah? Kindly confirm if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So I am assuming that everyone else had their notebooks to this point. So all you need to do is that sampling distribution. Sampling is very, very crucial when you're solving machine learning problems, because it gives you an understanding of how your data, the data you've collected, how important it is, and it makes you infer. Later on, after this, what you're going to cover is likely descriptive statistics. And when it comes to inferential statistics, you'll actually appreciate why it's very, very important to consider the sampling method that you use. Okay. So let's take, for instance, we want to study the average height of this population, and the population was the data submitted by guys who attended that specific class. So we want to study this height. Yeah. At the end of this exercise, it's going to be a brief notebook session, but I'll illustrate to you and give you link to a very, very good referential statistics website, where all these concepts are explained, and you can actually read through them. It's very, very comprehensive, and I use it a lot. Okay. So to get the mean, the average mean height is just as per cell number 60. If you've not typed that, please type it. So the journey is like we are going to do some sampling. Yeah, we want to do some sampling of data based on a certain sample size. We're going to change sample sizes and view the results. So if I may, it means central limit theorem is just basically in reference to given a statistic. A statistic could be, let me say, the mean, or it could be the mode of a certain population. Given a certain set of sample, then that statistic should more or less reflect the statistic of the population. So in this case, the population you're talking about, the statistics is 62. So the different samples that we can derive from this population, the normal, the distribution of this statistic should be normal, as the distribution of the population. Yeah. So if we take, for example, the height of a certain sample with a sample size of, say, we can start with sample size of 5 and then go to sample size of 10 and then go to some sample size of 15 and then 20. Let's start with knowing the shape. So if we do the shape, this is our data frame. So we can just copy instead of typing dot shape. And now shape gives you, sorry, we need to specify the height, the column. Oh, okay, I need to run everything. Let me run everything from the top. I remember I restarted the kernel. So let's run everything from the top. And then I don't think that is the correct height spelling. So this is the correct spelling. Also, it's giving us that error. Height for that. But if you want to take for the entire data frame, okay. So that is our shape there. We have 119 observations. Basically, observations are synonymous to records. So what we are going to do, let's try and create sample of, say, 5 records, 0, 1. So we take that. So basically, we are going to use the dot sample and specify 5 records. Yeah. So we want to generate with the 5 records. Let's generate like 10. You can just copy paste the same. 1. This one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. Yeah. So we have 10 samples. Yeah, from the population. So it's like our bucket where we have these balls, and then we go and pick randomly. Sample size being 5, we pick 5, and then we calculate the average height from those samples. Yeah, what would be the mean from those samples? And to derive the mean, we just do the mean for the height. We just from this sample. Now we are not making reference to our population. We are making reference to the sample, and you're taking the height dot mean. So you see, our first sample, the numbers, the random values, we have random values. The random values that were selected, I've given a mean of 54. Let's see the second one. So we can do the second one. Number 2. The second one gives a mean of 78. And then the third one, we can do the same. 52. The fourth, 61. So let me do everything. And you guys will get different values because the way your samples are being selected from the sample function is different. 57, 7 there, 57, then 8, 82, and then 9, 53, and then finally 10. 56. So if you see, if we were to do, and we will do this visualization in our next class, if we were to do a probability distribution function, or basically a histogram of these values, so the number of times it appears, let me say 54.7, or we could round them up. Like now this is 55, this is 79. Let me open an Excel sheet. Just give me a minute. Open an Excel sheet. I don't know if you guys can see, I shared the notebook. Can you guys see my Excel sheet?
Yes.
You can, eh? Perfect. Okay, so let's say the first one, we round them up. The first value is 58, we have 58. And then the second one is 79. The third one is 53. 53. The next one is 61. The next one is 60. The next one is 57. Is it 57, 58, 50? Next one is 57. No, the next one is 60, 60 and then 58. This is 58. 58, this one is 58 here. 58, this one is 57. 57. And then this one is 83. 83. And then this one is 54. 54. And then this one is 57. This one is 57. Okay,
You just confirm the first value. I think you got it wrong.
The first one? The first one, 55.
55.
Yeah, 55. Oh, so the first one is 55. Thanks for that. Okay, so the first one is 55 and then 79. Yeah. So 55, 79, 53. Now, if we were to get the frequency of each of these, so 55 is, let's say, 1, 79 is 1, 53 is 1, 61 is 1, 60 is 1, 58 is 1, 57 is 2, because we have it here. 83 is 1, and then 54 is 1. So because we are doing a distribution, it's that. So these values could form, I will show you guys, for today I'm going to show you, I'll just illustrate, but in the next class when you're doing visualization, we'll actually visualize the distribution as they happen, and it will form the intro to the visualization and EDA. Yeah. Now, what if we make the sample size bigger? Yeah. Let's make the sample size bigger. This one is sample size 5. Sample size 5. Let's do sample size 10. We'll definitely get different values, but let's do this. Sample size 10. Let's change this to 10. Oops. Okay. Oops. Ini kibarua. I hope you guys are doing the same. Instead of typing, we just have to replace them. Sample size 10. Gosh, we do this the same way. Okay. 10. Let me run this first. And then I run this, copy that. I'll run the first one. Sample size 10. Oops. 10. Run the second one. 10. And run the third one. I'm going to show you a simpler tool of doing this illustration. I just want you to know from within Jupyter how this is working. (61), 68. And then if we were to take the values again, we have 61 here as the first value. 61, let me just do this. 61 is the first value. I hope my desk is, my screen is still visible and you're not squinting. Is it visible? It is, huh? This one is 65. This one is 48, 57, 57, 49, 65, 65, and then this one is 77, then 60, 61, sorry, 61. This one is also 61. This one is 68. Okay, we've increased the sample size to 10. Yeah, and we've generated, in both cases, we've generated 10 samples, 1, 2, 3. There's also another variant of whether we maintain the same sample size, but we generate more samples. In this case here, we have generated 5 samples, yeah? And here we've also generated, sorry, we've done 10 samples, and here we've also done, this 10, record of, this is 9. We missed out 1. It needs to be 10. It means there is 1 record that we not. Okay, let's work with this one. This is, yeah, these are 10. What if we increase the number of samples? We go back and pull another 10. How would it look like? Yeah, so let's copy that and increase it. We put this 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Let's run that. And if we run it again, because the sample has changed, let's rerun this. The sample has changed, let's rerun that. Meaning different values have been picked. (64), 56, and then when you do 11, 11, 11. Okay, let me just see someone who's speaking. I'll put them to mute. Okay. 11, and then 12, and then 13, and then 14, and then 15, and then 16, and then 17, and then 18, then 19, and finally 20. Okay. Now, you'll observe that maybe just use your own notebook. Let's do it right now. Let me open Excel sheet and just quickly copy paste this. This is, we've increased, what we've done here, we have increased sampling to 20. So that is the value. I copy that. I copy that. That. You guys can do, you'll get different values, but I want us, which I would want to know, at least for the guys who are able to type, how does it look like? What is the majority of, what is the behavior you can observe in terms of working with, as you increase the sample size, what happens? As you increase the sample size, what happens? And as you increase the number of sampling you do. We did 10 samplings, we did, we've increased the sampling to 20. Is there any observation? Is there any observation? We're almost done. That is 13.72, 51, 51, 63, 93, 66, 59, 66. You guys can play with those. Try and increase your sampling size as well as the number of sampling experiments you do. Like you go get another sample, you go get another sample. So two things: increasing when you're getting a sample is for five records, or for 10 records, or for 15 records, and then you pick it like 5 times, or you pick it like 10 times, or you pick it like 20 times. So you're increasing the number of sample size as well as increasing the number of samples that you pick. So when you do that, what do you observe? So if we are to plot, yeah, a distribution of these means, sample means, if you are to plot a distribution of this sample mean, the idea is they should tend towards the mean of the population. So the mean of the population, we see that it was 60. It was 62. Yeah, this is a practical experiment that actually supports that central limit theorem. It was 62. And now you'll see as this was, it's not so clear with a sample size of 5. With a sample size of 10, you'll see that the values are a bit higher, though we have like 49 here as the mean. But with this sample size, you'll see like, sort of, if we were to plot visually, if you were to plot, ideally, though we will have skew, we will see some skewness in the plotting, but the skewness for this case, when the sampling is more, would be different from the skewness when the sampling is less. So the central limit theorem says that the distribution of the statistic being observed should adopt a normal distribution in tandem with that of the population. So for instance, like I said, the population mean is 62. I think it's 62. Yeah, 62. You'll see that as we increase the number of sampling, you'll see that the values of the various sampling you will observe a normal distribution. And this assumption or rather not assumption. This experiment just indicates or supports the central limit theorem, which is very, very fundamental in understanding distribution and also the probability of a certain event happening. And you see most of machine learning tasks are probabilistic, predictive. So we are just checking on what is the likelihood of something happening given certain observations, yeah? So ideally, let me use a site. You guys can come to this site. Can you guys see my screen? Robin.
I can see the screen.
This sampling distributions.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So the sampling distributions, it's accessible from, let me paste it. I'm pasting the link on chat. This is a very good site that I use, onlinestartbook.com. You guys can make, statistics is so big and I cannot cover it, and I'm also not a statistician. So I just try and relay the concepts that are helping us understand the basic concept. But as we graduate and as we advance, we'll make a lot of reference to even more advanced statistical concepts. And it would help us grow in our statistical knowledge, because it's very, very expansive. Where is chat? I'm trying to find out where chat is. Okay, chat there. To everyone. I've pasted the link, onlinestartbook.com, and the specific screen that is being shared here is the simulator. It has several simulators that I've picked the sample distributions for today. So what this happens is, you see this is a normal distribution of a certain population, yeah? Now this normal distribution, the next slide here, the sample data, the next sample data here, it's like, it's going to pick 5 records, 5 samples, or rather 5 observations, 5 samples from this normal population, yeah? And it calculates, like now, based on this, it has picked 5. Based on this, it's calculating here the mean, the median, the standard deviation, the skewness, and the kurtosis. These are very important statistics, and they give very important information about your distribution. So when you're doing analysis in machine learning, or rather when you're doing, you're about to do modeling, you need to spend a lot of time in, first of all, data cleaning, and make sure that your data is close to, as in it makes sense, like what we've done. And then if you're doing through a research, make sure that your data is not biased. And if it is biased, make sure you've documented it so that moving forward, it's understood that there is some level of biasness, and how do you address those bias moving forward? Now, you've picked this. We will cover this. I think we've covered this statistical terms, standard deviation, skewness, kurtosis. If you haven't, then I think there is an existing video you could play around with. Now, what this does is 5. Now, if we want to pick 10,000 similar samples, how would the distribution look like? Yeah. Right now, I can pick another 5. You see, that is how what happens. I can pick another 5. You see, I pick another 5. So you see what we are doing. This means the means that we are picking on Jupyter Notebook is what is being plotted here. How is the distribution? Like now, the first mean of the first sample. Let me click. How do I clear? The first sample you got a mean, yeah. The second sample you get a mean. Now this plot here, it's distributing. It's showing a plot of the means as you increase the samples. So you pick another 5 samples. it distributes the mean. This is the one for the mean for that. It picks another one randomly, and you can see what's happening. Robin, do you have a question? So we can continue, we can just continue doing this, and that is what is happening. You'll see that the distribution of the mean somehow is starting to form some shape. So instead of doing this one by one, how about we pull 10,000 samples of size 5, 10,000 samples of size 5 at the go. How will it look? Now you look at that, it's starting to form a normal distribution. Yeah. What if we pick 100,000 of sample size 5? Sample size is 5. We do that. You see. So basically, and you should also, when you're doing this, observe what happens to the standard deviation and skewness. The skewness has reduced significantly, and even kurtosis. Yeah. So these are statistics that would help you understand your data, like I mentioned before. So as you increase the size of your sampling, yeah. So you do several sampling, it needs to tend towards a normally distributed distribution. And another way we want to check, we've increased the sampling, but we've maintained the sample size to 5. Yeah. What happens when we increase the sample size? Say we put sample size to 25. How will this work out? So we could start, we animate. Yes? So what it's doing, it's picking 25, it's picking 25 samples and generating the mean of those 25 samples. Yeah. So sample data, the first mean you've seen, it's there. Let's pull another set of 25 samples. It's randomly picking 25 samples from the data set. So it picks those data points and then gets the sample. You see, the second sample, it says the mean is, say, X. So you look at this, there is means from 0 to 32. So if this is the median, so that would be 16. Maybe the average is 17 here, 16. So let's do it again. So when we pull again, we are pulling several samples from the data. When we're pulling several samples from the data, it calculates the mean. We do it again. Sample size in this case is 25. Okay, we do that again. So unlike previously, when the sample size was 5, this time around the sample size has increased, and almost each time we are pulling samples, we are having the same mean. That is what you're seeing. Yeah, we pull that again. So the sample size has increased. There. Okay, now how about we pull 10,000 of this sample size at one go? You see, it's even more normal. You check out the skewness as well as the kurtosis. Yeah. When you keep doing that, something keeps happening. It keeps changing. How about we do 100,000? There you go. It's normal. Yeah. Skewness is 0. And with a skew of 0, it means it's symmetrically distributed. Yeah. The skewness is absolutely 0. So this is a simulation of how a sample statistic can be used to study or even to determine the statistics of a population. And a good example of where this would be important is more often than not, we don't have a balanced data set. Yeah, so we will be tempted to try and balance and to make sure that the data set is balanced before we derive to our conclusion. So by balancing that, we'll need to do some sampling. oversampling, undersampling, either with replacement or without replacement. So those are some of the techniques you'll come across when we get there. We will look at, say, when you are doing fraud detection, prediction, or even when we are doing sentiment analysis and you're looking at the data that has 95% of people are happy. Yeah, if it's for customers to a certain company, it will be the opposite. 95% of people are not happy. So are you able to predict with some level of confidence those people who are actually happy in that kind of scenario? Yeah, and you'll see how the sampling, correcting this, the balance using sampling would play out. Okay, so in the next class, Hakim, you've just joined, but you are just wrapping up. We've covered quite a lot. You could play the recording, but it's not a problem. If the next slide I was saying is to actually start plotting and visualizing some of this, I'd given you guys a thought of you guys the previous week. Actually, it's 2 weeks now. I'd given you guys the homework of just thinking, how would you want to present this data? In what ways? Is it by height? Is it by? It would be good to hear from you guys. In what forms would you want to visualize this kind of data? We could discuss about that after either taking questions if they're there. So based on that, we could now, when we meet next, we do the visualizations for our data set. But I encourage you guys to go through this statistics website I've shared on the chat and get a glimpse of some of the statistical terms and concepts, and we engage. Is there any question or comment, or was it clear?
Hello.
Yeah, hi, Akim.
Good afternoon. Good morning, rather. Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
No, you unmuted me. I don't have a question.
Okay. I unmuted you because I wanted to let you know that it's been recorded. I noticed you just joined a bit late, so you might want to go through the recordings. But in case you could be having any question or even comment, you could just share.
No problem. I'll go through the recording, but I'll stay in the class for now.
All right.
Stay in class and follow.
All right.
All right.
Welcome again. Edgar? Eve?
Hello.
Hey, Edgar.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah.
Yeah, just missed the the data you are using. Can I find it?
Okay. Yeah, I'll just share the link. I think I shared it previously. I'll just forward it to you. No problem.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay. Eve? Robin?
Okay, no question at the moment. I'll just need to go through the statistics. I think I'll have a better understanding of the applications. But for now, so far, so good.
Okay.
Ayub.
Yes, Silas.
Just a question. these simulations that you've just shared,
Yeah.
the online stat book,
Yeah.
assume you have your own sets of data.
Okay.
Can you be able to load it into this stat book and it gives you this distribution?
No, this is just simulation based on from the site. But unless now you write a script to be able to do something like this.
Okay.
I haven't yet figured out a way of. I haven't been able to upload your own data into this. But it's an online tool just to illustrate this concept.
Okay.
Timo?
So far, so good. Maybe I go through it again, then I can get to have a query.
Okay. So if is it possible for you guys at least each one to think of the kind of visuals that someone can come up with and share that through? So that would form our EDA next time. So we will visualize and try and understand it. And eventually we will do what? We'll predict whether we'll use those inferences to predict whether or not someone will hit or miss a target. So I think that would be, Robin, were you able to do it the previous class? Do you have some thoughts?
Which one exactly?
How you'd want to view this data? Because you see the data set had, let me open the notebook. This data set, the final data set, the one after we did data cleaning, this one. It had several columns: observer number, height, distance. So one of the visual I'm thinking is how many misses were recorded by a certain observer, how many hits were recorded by a certain observer. For instance, how many misses were recorded on specific distance, for example, if we notice that most misses, we could come up with an hypothesis that the closer you are from the board, the higher your chances of hitting. So we would want to come up with a visualization, for instance, how many hits are distributed depending on the distance. So that kind of stuff. Do you understand? When it comes to statistics, it gets a bit complex. It gets a bit frustrating, but it's inevitable. So if you can just look through, you can look through the data, you can look through the data and try and think of the very many different ways within which you can look at this data to your conclusions. What is it that you can find out from this data? As it is, it's not telling you anything, but now with visuals, you'll be able to tell. If you come up with an hypothesis that the closer you are to the board, the higher your chances of missing. The lower the chances of missing the bullseye. Can you actually defend that by the observations that have been recorded? Or is it something that cannot be defended by the observations that have been recorded? Does it make sense? Robin?
Yes, it makes some sense. So it's something that we may just need to look further into it and to see how you can be able to draw conclusions and what you can be able to observe out of the data.
Okay.
Yes.
I know this part is tricky, but it's inevitable. You need to, when you're doing EDA, you need to, it needs to be driven by either domain or self-intuition. This is the point where you're asking questions and trying to figure out if the questions you're asking make sense. And then based on those, you can now infer and come up with some conclusions, which would now guide you to making your modeling. All right, I think that forms today's session. I know it's a bit off because it's statistics, but I can't wish it away. So if you guys could do that, it's important that you guys try and do that and try and think for your own self. Because when you think for your own self, the visualization will make a lot of sense. So you just learn, how do I visualize? How do I look at this data in terms of, well, for instance, what is the proportion of misses via hits? Do we have more misses? Do we have less hits? So which plot would we come up with? That would be probably a pie chart. So when building a pie chart, it helps you see the proportion of miss versus hits. So if the proportion of misses versus hits is highly imbalanced, yeah, if the proportion of hits versus miss is highly imbalanced, then we need to correct that by using some means. It could be what we've covered, undersampling, oversampling. How do we do that using from within Jupyter? How do we do that? How do we correct that? How do we make sure that we have at least equal representation? So the visualization of the proportion will be significant. If it's balanced, then we don't need to do that. Yeah. So you guys, I encourage you guys to think through. I'll also do the same, and we will learn now visualization moving forward. Once we do visualization, we'll do now all the way to the end to model.
Ayub.
Yes?
I just have a question, but it's off this one. On the learning path.
Yeah.
I've been away for, I think, 4 weeks right now, and I nimerudi nyuma sana. How far we reached? There was something of importance I had to attend to, and it was job related. Just came back the other day.
Yeah.
So
for learning path, it's starting in July. For the one that we made progress is NLP.
NLP. Okay.
That's what we've made progress. For the learning path, we'll work with July.
As from July.
Yeah.
Okay.
July kianza tu?
It's going to be the first week of July.
Oh, okay.
I'll share the proposed schedule.
Okay. And on LLP, the recordings are there?
Yeah, all of them are there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I guess that marks today's class. We meet again next week. Jaribu ufanye. I know it can be hectic, but if you don't take charge of your own learning, no one will. It can be really, really hectic, and I encourage you to find time and go through some of these things. Within a very short time, utapata watu wamefika mbali sana, and you're wondering, how did this happen? And I was here when we started. So jaribu sana.
Asante sana.
Okay, Ayub.
Yes, Robin.
So just a confirmation. Saturday class is at 9.
Yes, let's stick to 9. Today nearly push to 10. I notified you guys late.
Okay, it's fine. All right, sasa.
Okay.
Wacha tukanyage blanket
Okay,
kidogo.
thank you.
Sawa.
Wacha tukanyage blanket kidogo.
Sawa.
Tuanze saa 4.
Tuanze saa 4.
That will be a bit late.
Let's do it at 9. 9 is better.
9 is a bit better.
unaamka na una focus on that. If you put it late, because unajua kuna wengine wanaamka mapema, they do stuff, and then class inawapata in the middle, so they try to multitask, and in the process attention inakuwa split. And I know the fact that the sessions are being recorded, people are at peace of not attending classes. But it will catch up. It will catch up. I highly encourage you guys to attend classes. It will really catch up. Okay? So nine it is. Let's do this again next Saturday.
Okay, fine.
Last question.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I assume it's the same notebook we're going to be using next time. Huh?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So that we can code along, because I think I got lost kidogo.
Yes.
If it's the same notebook, then it's fine. So at least we should be having the notebooks beforehand.
Yes, it's the same notebook. And it's already been uploaded.
Asante.
Okay, Paul. All right, see you guys. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe.